Hello, everybody. I'm here with Emily Taylor, who's absolutely extraordinary in the way she thinks about things before I do. And one of her very important questions was, are we going to talk today for 30 minutes or for 60 minutes? So she's an advocate of listening to your audience as a nonprofit and maybe here on LinkedIn too, right, Emily? What do you think we ask people what their mileage is?
I say we just see how it goes. If we get a lot of questions, we can go a little longer.
Okay, that sounds good. If you have a preference, if you need to jump and you want us to really just condensate everything into 30 minutes, just let us know in the chat. We'll be looking at it. So Emily, let me introduce you. So excited to be with you today. We have a lot going on together. You presented at the Donor Participation Project, which is our fundraiser community, and your session was one of the best ever according to the feedback and according to my humble opinion. Tell us about yourself a little bit, your background, what type of works you do with nonprofit, and how it's different from the typical.
Sure. So my name's Emily Taylor, principal of teenyBIG, and I focus on strategic listening for nonprofits. And so what that really means is I help nonprofits connect with their audiences, understand their audience perspective, and use that to drive whatever type of engagement is going to help support your organization. And my background comes really from the for-profit world. I spent a lot of time doing consumer research and understanding how people buy things. And over the last 5 years, I've been translating those strategies into the nonprofit world. One, because it makes me a lot happier. And two, I think there's a lot of things we can take as we deal with donors who are used to buying consumer products. Those same methods and processes can help them connect with nonprofits.
Okay, Emily, I think we may have a glitch now because people are telling me that they can't see this. Did you pair this to your channel? And because what happened to me another time that this broke was that the paired connection did work. And maybe we can share that link with people.
Let me see.
Yeah, we can try to track it down. And then we can share that connection. We'll start shortly, yada, yada.
Let's see. Share event. What am I looking for here?
If you went through all the buttons to like stream it on your LinkedIn Live.
Yeah, would it be easier if I just leave and come back?
Well, maybe let's give that a yeah.
Okay, let me try that.
Let's give that a try.
Okay.
And yeah, what can we do? Okay. So I guess we try to look for your version of the broadcast. Which would be, I don't know, on your feed maybe?
Oh, yes, I do see it.
Okay, so if you can send it to me in whatever chat works for you.
Let's see. I'm just trying to figure out how to send it.
Just see like you copy the URL. Oh, and it's not working on Facebook either. Okay. Oh, Caitlin found it through a notification, and she's watching us fumble through all of this. Caitlin, could you chat in the link to the URL you're on? Can you see it? Do you see it on your stream, Emily?
Did you get my? Oh, here.
Where did you see it? Oh, somebody sees us on Facebook.
I'll send it to you through a private message.
Okay, thank you. Okay, happening now. Oh, look, my goodness, we're fumbling here. Okay, so
I know you're gonna watch us in past tense.
yes. Okay, so to everybody that's on the original yet not working feed, we will. They're working to resolve the stream now. Okay. Okay, please head over to this link.
So they just let one person stream it? Is that the...
No, it's an error.
lesson?
You're supposed to be able to stream to all of them. And to those who have seen us fumble through all of this, thank you and apologies.
We'll share our learnings with everybody.
Exactly. We're learning in public. Here is the correct. Here's the new link for today's interview with Emily. Okay. Well, let's see if people start connecting.
Okay.
And it looks, oh my goodness, we have a, oh, Anne found it, Andrea found it, Scott, hi Scott. So, okay, so we're going to be living here. Yes, technology humbles everyone. It's absolutely horrendous. And we get a little bit nervous here on the other end.
Yeah.
Emily, would you like to dive
right
right
into
It's less
easy to see on Zoom.
Yeah, you're right. We forget like how easy Zoom makes it. So Emily, you have experience in the for-profit sector. You took your training in industrial design thinking and you started applying it to nonprofits. What has that experience been like?
It's been really exciting, but also interesting how, I think I've kind of lived in this experience of, okay, how do we think from the consumer perspective? How do we put ourselves in the eyes of people doing the things that we want? And I think I'm surprised at how infrequently nonprofits do it. And it makes sense. You want to focus on your mission. That's what's really most important. But it really creates a different experience for the people that are working with your organization. So I think that's really the big shift that I've been trying to talk to people about is like, how do you take a step back, look at what you're doing from the eyes of your donors, your potential donors, and use that information to help engage them in better ways?
Okay, and can I share something that I found to be super valuable in your work, like from the perspective of somebody who's inside, behind in the trenches at a nonprofit, is that it gets everybody, just kind of the process of working through some of the frameworks and tools that you have is very helpful. Like it gets everybody thinking in the same direction. And I wrote about rowing, but I sometimes have that image of nonprofits where everybody has their oar and they're trying to get somewhere different and the boat doesn't move.
Yeah, I think that's something that's been really interesting to me is just how siloed sometimes departments within nonprofits are. And even if you're the same person, if you're doing social media and, donor relations or program management, you tend to put on the hat. And because, you're constrained for time, I see it over and over. It's like, you just got to be the expert at what you're doing. But if you don't take a step back and think about well, how are we working together to, bring donors closer to our organization from social media, through programs, through donor relations? How can we work together so that people don't have a jarred experience, they have a smooth experience, and it really helps them better understand the organization?
Yeah, absolutely. And we had some comments about with people that already had experience with donor engagement mapping earlier on when we thought we were broadcasting, but we were all alone, really. Maybe if you made it over to this version of the interview, you can share that with us. We had some people talking about plans giving and how they'd applied it in their own shops. But what have you found, Emily? And I know we're going to go into the basics and we're going to share some amazing things that you've put together for people that are here today and a course, etc. But what have you found, like what's the level of fluency with this type of thinking in nonprofits? Does it come easily? Is it hard? Is it?
Well, I think there's a lot of nonprofits that are thinking about, before and after the donor engagement. So, maybe what is someone doing right before they make a donation, and how are you engaging them after, through a thank you, through some kind of follow-up. And so, I think that is pretty common. But as we look at like what it really takes to engage people, there's actually several steps before they make a donation. And that's where, it's kind of like you don't kiss on the first date. Like there's just some elements to like building a relationship versus just focusing on that transaction of donation. And so it doesn't necessarily mean you're doing new things, but you're thinking about how are all your social media posts and your emails, warming people up so that they're ready for that, that relationship stage.
Well, you're kind of like leading people right along a path that you believe is the best one, no? Or the ideal one for you.
Yeah, I use the analogy a lot of like, if you learn an instrument, let's say you're learning the guitar, you don't learn a big Van Halen riff on the first go, right? You learn something simple and exciting, and your teacher gives you a little, maybe a Beatles song that's a little easier to learn. So there's something exciting, but it's also something approachable, and you work your way up to playing something more complicated and understanding all the little, notes and pieces of a guitar. Like you can't just take it all at once. And so how can you break down all the expertise that you have as a nonprofit for solving your mission? How do you break it down into something that's bite-sized chunks and manageable, but works people up to really understanding the big issue?
Awesome. So a big announcement for people that are here today and would like to just get more acquainted or have some examples. If you want to see, okay, this sounds interesting. I like the concept, but what does this actually look like? Emily has very generously put together some worksheets for us. So just put a comment here in the chat and we'll make sure to get them to you afterwards. And then Emily, you currently have 2 versions of a donor engagement mapping course, right? Would you like to tell us about them?
Yeah, so we have sort of a bigger full 4-week course that helps you work through an entire engagement map. And just since I don't think I've covered it yet, the typical 6 stages of engagement mapping are observing, following, endorsing, contributing. That's the donation part. So we got 3 stages before we even get to that: owning and leading. And so in the 4-week course, we cover all of those. In the 1-day course, we really just focus on the beginning of that map, because it's really one of the most important. If you don't have people coming in, new people coming into your organization, as you get attrition, like it becomes a problem. And so that 1 day we really focus on the early stages and how you can really make sure you're engaging people to follow your organization and start to get that information.
Okay, lovely. Well, yes, you kind of told me off because we were jumping steps as to let's just talk about what this thing is. And thank you, Aaron and Deb and everybody who's asking for the worksheets. We'll get them to you for sure. What is a donor? What is the basic concept of donor engagement mapping?
Well, as I mentioned before, the big concept is that we're not looking at transactions with people. We're looking at building relationships. And to do that, we go through stages. We build up to making a donation, joining a board, whatever the bigger actions that you want people to take. And so not everyone follows this perfectly, but I always start with the six basic stages that I mentioned. The observing, which is people who are aware of your organization. They have to kind of be aware to even make any action, make any engagement. They need to know who you are. So how do you get people who are observing you? The next stage would be following. How are they getting information? Are they on your email list? Are they following you on social media? they're not really doing any investment, but they've at least committed to taking in that information.
Mm-hmm.
The third is endorsing. How are they actually associating themselves with you? Maybe making a comment on your social media, inviting a friend to an event. They're doing something that is, they're willing to put their name next to yours.
Mm-hmm.
Next is contributing, which can be, it could be a donation, it could be volunteering. There's all just different ways people can actually start to support your work.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly is owning and leading. And this is really where you get into those high level engaged people who might help take on a project, might actually be encouraging other people to go through this map, getting them to sign up for your mailing lists
Mm-hmm.
or to
Mm-hmm.
make a contribution. They're actually kind of being part of your team. So people need to
So
kind of
that's
go
very
sometimes.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Emily, sorry to interrupt you, but something that comes to mind, is this necessarily linear? Like, does everybody have to go through all the steps, or like, how do you, I approach kind of just the fluidity of, everything with relationships?
People definitely move through in different paces and can jump around. The idea is really, with anything, there's life and we don't all fit into perfect little maps. But this map really just helps to put something down so that you can use it and reference it. But yeah, you're going to have to expect that some people will jump into it. Perhaps I know I've definitely done that where I just see a cause that I like and I'm like, you know what, I'm just jumping right into donation. But you do have to wonder, if someone does that, do they still need a little bit more to repeat that donation?
Exactly.
You still want to make sure they go through that experience of learning about your work.
Yeah, and that your different teams are kind of aware of those relationships too. I always go back to the same thing, Emily, where just I've seen so many times where you have like, the team that solicits, annual fund, and then the team that engages, and the team that does and since they're not connected, they're not. It just seems like you're sub-optimizing. You have worse results than you could. No.
Yeah, exactly. And you kind of have to, you can't plan for every single situation or keep track of exactly where people are at. But if you have a general plan, you can move most people down that path. I was actually talking to someone this week. I did a workshop on this and she was talking about how she got a corporate partner and was really excited and sent out that, campaign to the corporate partner and like nobody made a donation. And
You wrote about that.
yeah, and I think that's a good example of, there's different ways or, there might be, if there's a relationship already built with that corporate partner, maybe people will think differently. But we talked about different ways, like maybe instead of asking for a donation, you could offer a quiz and teach people about the work that you do, get them on that email list, give them a little bit more information, then ask for that donation.
And it's so funny that your experience and what you advocate for is so similar to what I've seen in fundraising and also with the donor participation project, which is that you need to give people achievable next steps. So a lot of the time is like a next step could be just joining the call today. The call, our conversation today, and then maybe, well, that's easy because I was on LinkedIn, I was reading this, I'm still here, and then the next step is maybe join the, provide your email to join other types of calls, and then that kind of leads down an engagement path that produces good results. Is that more or less kind of the concept?
Yeah, and I think also seeing it as an exchange, like how you were saying that. I mean, yes, our audience, should support and donate to our mission. Like that's really, why nonprofits exist and why people help support them. But there is still a give and take, and so much like a consumer transaction, thinking about it in a way that's a nonprofit transaction, like are you giving people a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of happiness for seeing some improvement in the world? Are they better understanding, homelessness, whatever you're working towards, like that's of value to them. And so if, just like joining this, we're to offer value to the people on here and giving some, freebies away. Like those are the kind of things that just help people. And if it aligns with your mission, it's not necessarily like always a free cup of coffee or a bar of chocolate or something. It's
exactly, or a party, and then it's like when those galas start to get off the rails, right? Where they're just not tied to the mission.
Yeah. And so, that's something and this is where my listening experience comes in is really trying to understand what's important to your audience. Why do they care about your work? Because it might just be, they really want to know how you're helping people. They want to know, what changes you're making, and they want to be a part of it. I think that's something we've seen a lot with trends in donors as audiences, they don't actually get younger, but like as generations move, the audiences of today really want to participate, and I think figuring out what that value you're offering to them and breaking it into little bits and pieces allows them to want to be more supportive.
That's so great. And I love the way first you present it, which is so calm and thoughtful, and then how you having achievable steps. It kind of sounds like that concept of the funnels in marketing, but that just sounds so extractive, right? Whereas this is so much about adding value. I just love your approach. We talked about the different phases that you work with participants in your workshops and your other clients to identify in the organization. Who is the best person in an organization to join this type of workshop, or should it be many? Should it be more than one?
I think it's really helpful to have several team members, especially as we talked about, from those different silos, if that's how your team is currently working, because you can build it together and see how you can work together. But if not, it really just takes a champion, someone who sees the importance of this and is willing to help convince others that working together is going to be more beneficial. I think having a single map just allows everybody to look at it and make plans and figure out, how are your program and social media team, how are they thinking about what stage people are at, and who do we want to target this event towards? I was just writing down a few examples, and one thing that I had is, I was working with an organization that just really, it was classical music, and they just had a lot of very expert followers, people that knew a lot about classical music, and the newer audience that maybe thought the events were fun but didn't know as much, and so their events were very targeted towards these expert music lovers. And when they started to try to target things towards the newer people, it felt I think there was sort of this discrepancy of like, well, are you changing? Are you really authentic? And what we talked about is how do we, when you have an event, figure out who, what stage of engagement are those people, so that you can focus your event towards them. Or if you're going to combine them, make sure you touch on different aspects. You get that, the engagement of the experts, and you get the engagement of the newer people, so they understand what's going on.
I just find so much value in having these conversations. Andrea, who's a wonderful member of our little group, the Donor Participation Project, says, we haven't constructed actual maps, but we have begun thinking more in terms of the donor journey than disconnected appeals and communications. How does the concept of a donor engagement map relate to the donor journey? Is it the same? Is it similar?
Well, I know there's a lot of the same terms for different things, and so I'll let you guys know how I define it. So for me, a journey is sort of like a single experience. So when you think about a donor journey, it might be You get the email, you click on the link, you go to the donation page. What happens after? It might be, an automated series of thank yous and responses that happen. But it's sort of a closed experience that someone has, where the map is really thinking more about people's entire experience with your organization, from first learning about it to going as far as they will with engaging with your organization. So you could actually have, in my school of thought, you could have little journeys within your map. How are people joining your email list? What's that journey there? But overall, it's an experience.
Wow. Okay. So for the way you look at it, a journey is more like the micro, the very specific steps from maybe the big steps that you talk about or you look at when you do donor engagement mapping. That's really helpful.
I think with the engagement mapping, it's really about how much do people know about your work, and how do you need to approach them, because they might, they're at different stages of learning about it. And a journey map is really, I think anytime you enter a store, you buy a product, like those are sort of, they could be anyone at any time, but breaking it down into the different elements of it, like entering the store, browsing, pulling something off the rack, you're able to improve those experiences just by breaking them down and making them ideal.
Okay, so
hopefully that was clear.
I love it. I mean, I'm eating it all up because it's wonderful. And Michelle just posted a really good point, and which I already mentioned several times. Do you think the map helps break down internal silos? A clear way to work together. That's the part where I'm in love with this concept. And I was going to ask you, Emily, do people invite you to do like strategic retreats? Because it sounds like it would be the perfect kind of very practical, action-oriented activity to get everybody on the same page during a retreat. Have you done some of those?
I haven't done engagement mapping at a retreat, but I totally agree with you. I think it makes sense to have everyone together. So I've done, sometimes we'll do coaching where it will be several members of a team, and I'll take them through and we'll build an engagement map together. But I know retreat is when people are really focused on the bigger picture, and this is this really brings up great conversations around, what are you doing internally and how is that viewed externally, and how can you make those work in your favor?
Yeah, absolutely. So for folks who are interested, Emily is doing 2 courses within the context of the Donor Participation Project, just because we loved her so very much when she came and presented for us very kindly about a year ago. And I have a related question to these courses, which is, Emily, how do you know if you're ready? Or is there such a thing as not being ready for doing this type of exercise?
I think the conversation is never too soon. But in terms of being ready, I have found not every organization is ready to take this on, and I say that because if your organization is very siloed, you're going to really have to build some consensus to break down some of those silos. And work together to really see this process from your donor's perspective. So there just needs to be some openness to that. And I think for that to happen, what I found is just, if you have other fires, you're trying to hire people in certain roles, or, there's just a grant that didn't go through, like some of those things they're going to be, fires that need to be put out before you can really take that step back and look more holistically. So I'd say those 2 things, not having fires, being open to it. And then also just being open to rethinking events. A lot of times when we have these conversations, people think like, oh my gosh, now I have to do double the amount of work. And really what an engagement map should do is show you what work you maybe shouldn't be doing, and which ones are gonna, you mentioned the galas, like I see a lot of that discussion now. Like, take a step back and like, what, now that you haven't had your gala for 2 years, what was it really for? What was the purpose? And is it really helping move people along on that engagement path, or is it just sort of like a feel good thing, which in itself is not a problem. But if you're spending tons of time and money and risk running those galas, it starts to put that value equation in question. That was a hard sentence to say.
But you pulled it off just because you have a sublime intellect. Could we kind of look at a practical example based on something that somebody posted very recently in our donor participation project listserv? And Caitlin, you might know a little bit about this, but and for others, if you have a practical example that you'd like Emily to kind of consider right now, please do put it in the chat. But I'll start off. So there's this organization that is preeminently an educational organization, but does tours, and they're very successful. So they're associated with parks, etc. And they were rethinking, what they do with tours. Usually people just came and went, and they didn't kind of have a plan for them. Would this be a good kind of exercise to think of them, from a donor engagement mapping perspective?
Totally. I think, and I'll just kind of riff on what you've, maybe I don't fully understand, but, knowing what's, if people are coming on those tours and that's their first touch point, that's where you really want to have, get them on some social media, get them on email lists, making sure that they're now going to get more information. I think that would be a key thing. And if they're also new, giving them some fun, memorable tidbits. I know a lot of times, mission work is complicated and it's hard to explain, but there's certain little facts and stories that people latch onto, and it might not, it might not be the most important ones, but I give the example of like, you might be a financial expert, but when you go to buy a pair of scissors, you're not a scissor expert. Like, you might just buy the one that's, pretty and pink and is your style, and you go home and maybe it doesn't cut the best, but at that point, you're just not as invested and you're not ready to fully understand things. So you need that Beatles song, that pretty scissors, whatever it is, you need something to hook people so that they're ready to learn more. And so knowing what those little stories are, they're still real stories. You don't want them to be not aligned with your mission, but it's what
I'm hearing you say, Emily, is that it's okay to actually have like a simplified, fun, gamified version of yourself early on in that donor engagement journey.
And I think when you see it as part of that process, it's it's a lot easier to see the authenticity of it and how it's going to lead people to hear a much more in-depth story and learn about your work.
That's so awesome. You have another great example about a restaurant, right, to illustrate this process.
Sure. And this is really getting to, if it's a little confusing about what a donor experience is and how it might be different from your team, internal teams, I always have people think about a restaurant. What's your experience at a restaurant, and are you thinking about who's chopping your food, who's sitting you down, who's kind of cleaning the tables, who's cooking? You're not really thinking about just all those different pieces, and you're thinking about your experience. And if you have a good experience at a restaurant, or if you have a bad experience, it's that holistic view. I mean, it could be the bathrooms were stinky and that ruins your whole experience. And so that is where, it doesn't mean everyone has to do everything, but if you're working together, you can, work together to provide that great meal, that great ambiance, and minimize some of those negative things so that people have that memorable experience.
That's amazing. And that's kind of where the role of the master weaver, right, that pulls it all together, maybe following a donor engagement map, or is so important, like just
Yeah, so you
having
don't have to be
somebody.
thinking about it all the time. Like you put it down on paper, and so you can go when you're starting something new, you can reference it and work together.
Mhm. You talk, so you made a couple of notes for takeaways that would be helpful for folks that are with us today. And I loved how you talked about being aware of what the action is that takes someone from one step to the next. And again, because of this silo issue, I feel like we often just focus on being successful in our, what we're responsible for. So I'm responsible for, and I know people are going to love this, for the gala. So I want to be, have a successful gala, but I'm not thinking of what the handoff is to the next step, which might be a follow-up conversation with a gift officer. I mean, I don't know. How can people, is it just, you just need to keep an eye open for that? Or how can people think about it in those
I think you
terms?
should also, if you're putting effort into something, what do you want people to do on it? One example that comes to mind is, like, I know a lot of people are like, oh, if we just had a viral social media thing, like we'd get all these donors. And I think rather than just trying to put stuff out there and hope that it's viral, you have to ask, like, share this with your friends, have your friends, if you like this, have your friends sign up for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so giving people, rather than just hoping that they'll have a certain action, reminding them, over and over again, because we're all busy people. Um, and asking people to do something, even if they don't do it this time, maybe next time. But it really helps them, provide that link. If it, obviously when we want people to make a donation, I think that's, we put those links in there. But if you want them to bring someone to the event, let them know. It's those types of things are how you get there, and you have to ask people. You could even send prepare people for it. Like, hey, we're going to be sharing this. It'd be really
Mm-hmm.
helpful if you could share it with your friends, because we'd love to get 50 more people involved. Those types of really specific asks are a lot
Mm-hmm.
easier for people to do than, like, what do you think?
Yeah, here's a great video of our organization. Just admire.
Yeah.
And I think it also feels almost more inclusive. So in that spirit, Emily, for everybody who's here today, if you liked it and you think somebody in your circles could benefit from hearing what Emily's up to and her courses, and maybe even get a worksheet too, please do share it. It's pretty easy on LinkedIn. And if you'd like a worksheet yourself that Emily has very generously prepared for us, just put a comment in the chat right now and we'll get it to you. What else? Is there anything that we haven't covered? Are there any other questions? I'm just kind of brainstorming here. But
Yeah.
what would be your ideal world? Would every nonprofit do this? Do you think it can help everybody? Or just, well, with the caveats of, if your house is on fire, don't start doing the math right now.
Yeah. Put the fire out first. Yeah, I think it can help everybody, especially, organizations that are dealing with the general public. If you,
Uh-huh.
maybe you're focused on grants and you're not as, dealing with the general population, but if you are, I always just let people know, like, you are an expert at what you do and
I
your
love that.
nonprofit's work, and other people aren't. I know my scissor example is a little weird, but, like, that we're all experts at something and not experts at everything else. And so if you don't think of, view things through the eyes of those people outside of your organization, you might be approaching it in a way that's not accessible to them. And so that's really, a lot of the work that I do is around listening. And if you're not sure, listening is a great way to see their perspective, see how they are experiencing your work, and how they, what are those points of understanding that they need to have in order to really get to be closer to the expert that you are. And
Yeah.
so they go hand in hand, building the map and listening. But it's a process. It can take, you can spend time on it. You don't have to do it super quickly, or you can do it in 4 weeks.
Wow. So what I love about your approach is that it presumes that the expertise is already inside the organization versus now Emily's going to come and teach us what's what, and there's this model and you have to do it or else, it's the end. It's more like you're teasing out and you're making it work, right, with whatever they have.
Yeah, I'm definitely not an expert in what any nonprofit does. And it's really not about changing that. It's about, getting outside of your bubble and outside of your expertise so that you can make sure others can really understand it.
That's so wonderful. Another place where Emily is sharing a ton of her knowledge is in the Donor Participation Project Conference, which is coming up, exciting. Next month, starts April 22. Emily's going to be one of the lightning round presenters. We have 4 virtual sessions over 4 Fridays. So somebody told me I can't make it, and then I answered, well, it's hard, can't you do any Friday? So we do hope you can check it out. There's scholarships available if cost is an issue, and we really would like to see you there. And I know Emily is going to share a 2 to 3 minute tip, success or failures. He's not telling us which yet. That's going to blow your mind. So we'll love to see you there.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, I love the way you guys have rethought what a conference is. I think this is part of it, is like, what does your audience need, and how do you deliver it in a way that doesn't necessarily need to be stuck in the traditional mindset?
Yeah, Emily has been posting about listening for the last, I think, lots of days, lots of videos, all amazing. And she does these great cover images. So when they come up in your feed, they really brighten up your day. But
I do like some color.
Yeah, they're amazing. So she writes about she's been posting about listening. Connect with her. I can guarantee that she's responsive to your inquiries, and that she's very helpful in general. So please do that. Check us out. We'd love to see you around. We think there are enough opportunities to do that. And thank you so very much. Have a great one, Emily. Would you like to say last words, final words?
Oh, just thank you guys for coming out, and as Louis mentioned, follow me on LinkedIn. I'm always just offering all sorts of free stuff, and I think if you're having trouble changing the mind of your organization to get to this point where you're ready to do it, I'm always offering some tips and tricks on that. So it would be a great place to kind of get some ideas for it.
Oh my goodness, change management. That could be just a whole other session. We so need your expertise. Thanks a whole lot.
Thanks for having me. Great to see all of you.